Good morning, good morning, good morning, and hello to our listeners from around the world, and welcome to another edition of This Morning with Soulivity. I am Brian Wesley Johnson, and I'm your host today, and I'm joined by my beautiful co-host, Sheila Applegate. Hello, Sheila.
Good morning.
Good morning. We got lots of good things to talk about, including a very special guest that we're going to be introducing in just a second. But before we begin, we want to remind our listeners, listen, this is your space to have real conversations about things that are going on in your world, and things that we can use to empower ourselves. So we want to make sure that this is an interactive conversation, that you are, posting your questions, that you are giving us your thoughts and comments. Just post them directly to either our chats on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll get those immediately. Or if you're on one of our other social media platforms, just post into the comment section, and we'll get an answer to you as soon as we can. So why don't we get started? Sheila, how you doing? I mean, what's been going on in your world?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm adjusting to being back from my trip out west, and I kind of took yesterday easy.
Oh,
But today I'm ready
nice.
to get back in the full force.
Nice. Yeah, here in DC, we had our first real kind of snow. And it's the perfect kind because it'll be gone by either later today or tomorrow. But it's beautiful. I was kind of surprised because it seemed like it went from rain to snow last night. So I was
Oh,
kind of pleasantly surprised when I woke up and looked out and saw everything, pseudo white.
right.
So,
It's so beautiful.
yeah. So we got a great show. We got a great guest that I'm going to introduce in a minute. Um, you know, the subject today that we're going to be talking about is sometimes hard to talk about, but we have the perfect person. I think, right, Sheila? I think we have the perfect
Yeah,
person to talk to about.
absolutely. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. So, why don't we go ahead and find out a little bit more about our special guest? Karen Johnson's fast paced professional life came to an abrupt halt when she lost her 27-year-old son to a heroin overdose. Rather than grieve in a way that made people around her comfortable, she did the unexpected. She retired, sold her house and all of her household goods, and went on a 2.5-year journey that took her all around the world, finding a spiritual practice along the way. Writes Karen, I want you to know something really important. You may be feeling stuck in your grief and wondering why you can't seem to get over it. I felt the same way until I realized we do not get over grief. It's not like catching the flu. We aren't sick. There is no cure, and we can't medicate it away. Grief is a state of being that carries energy that you can tap into to create a new life. Just as we use the energy of other newly acquired states of being, like marriage or parenthood, to transform our lives, we can likewise use the energy of grieving to transform. So, with that, it's my pleasure to welcome to This Morning my dear friend, Dr. Karen V. Johnson, author of Living Grieving. Good morning, Karen.
Hey, good morning. How are you all today? I'm happy to
This
be
is
here.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is fantastic. I'm so glad that you're here. This is such, after, we had an interview together about a year or so ago. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll post that interview so people can see it. It can go into deeper. But I found after that interview this lightness about dealing with at that time was the preparation for my father's transition.
Mm,
And I'm going to tell you, that came in at the perfect time because it allowed me to be okay with grief,
yeah.
Yeah.
and to gain a deeper inner awareness of myself and a deeper meaning of what my father meant to me during that time, during his time here on the planet. I mean, he's still around, he's still watching over, me and guiding me.
Mhm.
And so I want to thank you first and foremost for writing this book and being um, a guide to people to actually live their grief. So my first question to you is, I know, we talked a little bit about your story in the introduction there, but can you give us your own take in terms of when people ask you that first question, which is like, what led you to write this kind of book?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Um, well, yeah, thank you for that. I'm glad the book found you just when it did. And that's why I love to be on shows to reach those people that just need a little help through their grief, like I did. And I didn't have resources. So I lost my 27-year-old son to a heroin overdose, and he wasn't an addict. It wasn't, expected. It was unexpected. And he went to a party, got drunk, and with a bunch of young men decided they were going to try heroin. So
Wow.
his loss, was sudden, unexpected, and he was struggling. Don't get me wrong; he was struggling in many ways, trying to find himself and deciding whether he had a business that didn't go very well, and so go to college. What is he going to do with his life? Things like that. But nothing that caused me to think, oh boy, something terrible is going to happen. Although I did want to have a discussion with him after I got back from this vacation that I went on. So I went on this vacation to South Korea. And one day when I was there, I get a call, and I hadn't felt good all that afternoon. So, day is night, night is day. So it was his even nighttime of passing was my afternoon in Korea, where I'm feeling really sick. And all of a sudden I get this call, and they hang up. And so I called back, which I don't usually do to numbers I don't know. For some reason, I just had to call back, and it was a detective. And he said, yeah, where are you? And I said, I'm in South Korea. Why? I need to talk to you about your son. Why? What happened? Do you have an accident? What's going? No, he's dead.
Oh,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so you can imagine, it was like the unimaginable scenario. So here I am, night is day there, day is night there. It's evening. There's no planes out until the next morning. So, I'm calling everybody frantically. And finally I get to the airport in the morning. I managed to get on a flight, and then Ben appears in front of me, just like his good old smiling self. We would always laugh. He would sing to me. He would come in. He was, he would smile and things like that. And then he kind of faded away. And so I called my ex-husband and frantically and said, you got to go to the ME. I think he's alive. I think he's alive, and he's trying to get out of the freezer. You got to go. You got to go. You got to check,
wow.
Right. Because I had no context. So I was very left brain. If you had asked me before that time, I would have said, alive is alive, dead is dead. There's nothing else. I really had no spiritual practice that was active. And so I didn't realize I was having a visit from his spirit that had left. And so, of course, they checked, and she said, I'm sorry, he's gone. But death sometimes is a doorway. So it can either be a door that we keep firmly shut, or a door that we keep open.
Right.
And open to possibilities that maybe we didn't see before. Possibilities like life after death, and maybe a fun life after death. We've been acculturated to think of eternal slumber and the resurrection, and all those things are fantastic, but there might be a little bit more too to the whole experience. And many people who've had near-death experiences talk about that too. So,
wow.
so that's how my journey with grief and dying began. Yeah.
You already have your doctorate, but man, talk about another doctorate. I mean, you started, that's a PhD
Right.
level event. Like
Right.
you
Oh
didn't,
yeah.
you skipped over all the other stuff.
Yeah, right. Sometimes I think sometimes you know, sometimes I think we're called to enter a spiritual life or not. And
Mhm.
Mm.
sometimes the doorway is a gentle one if we're not so stubborn as I was. And sometimes the doorway, spirit gives you a little kick. And so it's a different way of looking through death, looking at death. What if a lot of times we're stuck in our grief and many things keep us stuck. So we get stuck on the idea that I shouldn't live because my loved ones are gone. I shouldn't enjoy life because that's disrespecting them. I shouldn't, how do I go on? I don't want to go on. I don't need to go on. I was certainly in that category of I don't want to go on. I don't need to go
Right.
on. I want to die. And, but what if their destiny and our destiny is exactly perfect the way it is? His destiny was to go at that time. And my destiny was to learn to live without him and to honor his death by living. And so that was what I took I was so distraught and so out of it. Nothing made sense anymore. So I couldn't be a judge anymore. I couldn't live that life. I just needed to go and do something, right? And so I sold my house and my cars and everything and all my goods. And I went on a 2.5 year journey around the world to talk to spiritual leaders everywhere: South America, Africa, Bangladesh, India, Taos, New Mexico, all over to find what is this? What do we do with grief? What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to live? How are we supposed to go on? And so the book is a download really from spirit, I think, of how we might go on this journey with grief,
Mm.
That's
right?
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really commend you for taking that time and really stepping out of societal expectations to take care of yourself. My daughter just turned 27 on Sunday, so it hits pretty
Mm,
close to home to hear you even say the age and imagine that.
yeah.
What are some of can you give a couple examples of what you experienced in the different countries?
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, gosh. So the Hanuman Temple, for example, in Taos, New Mexico, I had this experience sitting in the Hanuman room and hearing this voice sort of accented with an Indian accent saying to me in my head, your son's death is not your fault. You need to
Wow.
you need to learn self-love. Ooh, right? So I
Mm.
was a crying, sobbing mess there. I pretty much cried and sobbed through every country all over the
Good
world.
job.
I
I
left
know, right?
tears.
Good job. Exactly.
Good job. Left tears everywhere. So, and then same thing in Africa. There was an old shaman that he used bones to look at things, and basically the same thing, saying, death. This is your subject. This is death. And then, shamans. I became a shaman along the way. I met Alberto Vioto in the Four Winds Society, and so I learned that spiritual practice, which isn't a religion. It's a spiritual practice that we work with the energy body, the field around us. And so we have stones. We work with medicine stones. And when I was in Peru, I was called to pick up all white stones, which is very unusual. We usually pick up stones that are any color, different colors.
Mhm.
And so I have one, we call it a mesa, an altar, a tablet that's all white stones. And I said, I don't know. I was asking one of the shamans there, indigenous shamans, I don't know what this is about, but he said, white altars are those who have transcended death.
Ooh.
Mm.
Yeah, those for those who have transcended death. So that's sort of my calling, my life's work is grief and death and trying to help people to navigate out of that place of being stuck, lost, hopeless, in despair, and actually become a little bit lighter, get unstuck, become lighter, and awaken from the nightmare. Ooh, and then
Mhm.
create a new life out of the ashes of the old, and challenge some of the assumptions that society makes about grieving and how it's supposed to look and how we're supposed to feel and how long it's supposed to take. So there's no win in grieving. If you
Right.
grieve too long, they're going to say, "Oh, you need a pill. Oh, she's really a mess." Blah blah blah. And there is now a DSM in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. There's actually an illness, a mental illness called prolonged grief. Interestingly enough, and so let's medicate that away, right?
Oh no.
Yeah. And then if you don't grieve long enough, then you'll be criticized. Oh, well, she certainly didn't seem to bother her much. She just went on with her life. So you can't win. You might as well go on your own journey. And your journey is your journey. And we live in this fast-paced world of sound bites. Let's get over it. Let's move on. Next. Well, grief is not like that. And we often impart that to people that we know that are grieving because in our culture, we really fear death. We're not comfortable with death and dying, and so we're not comfortable with the grieving either.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
so as we fear death and our own mortality is brought to our face when we're in front of people who are grieving, so we want to push them away and say, well, let's get over that. Let's not talk about that, right?
Right.
Let's just have a nice day.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Right.
Exactly. You know, let's take a put a push pin on that because I want to pull that string in the next segment because I
Mhm.
think I think that's how we all have been socialized to believe how to deal with death, right? Just
Yeah.
get over it, right? Accept it and move on.
Right.
And that is not healthy. And we know that that's not healthy. So everybody, we're gonna come back with more from Dr. Karen Johnson and her book Living Grieving in just a second. In fact, it'll be 60 seconds. So we'll see you on the other side.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
And welcome back to This Morning with Soulivity. This is Brian Johnson, along with my beautiful co-host, Sheila Applegate, and special guest, Dr. Karen Johnson. We're talking about her latest book, Living Grieving. And when we left off, you know, we were talking about this whole get over and accept syndrome when it comes to death. And I brought this up in our interview, Karen, last time, where I was reading that about 2.5 million people die in the United States annually, leaving an average of 5 grieving people behind.
Yeah.
And it is estimated that 1.5 million children, 5% of children in the United States, have lost one or both of their parents by the age 15.
Yeah.
So talking about getting over, I mean, really, we're just going to get over it. Can you talk a little bit about what you tell people when that's like, you know, kind of pushed on people?
My answer is we never get over it, but
Right.
we can get through some of the heavier aspects of it, and we can come out the other side with a different life, a different purpose, a different person. And it's so important to deal with grief. I think especially with children, a lot of time children aren't in the loop. You know, we're trying to protect them. We won't say why mommy died or how daddy died or all these details. And then it plagues them the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And then later they come to somebody like me with maybe an autoimmune, maybe other kind of illnesses. And if I go back far enough, I'm almost always find unresolved grief or loss.
Mhm.
And so I think it's so important to talk with children about it. And sometimes the parent who's left behind doesn't want to talk. Nobody wants to talk about it. They want to pretend this thing didn't happen. It's too hard. It's too much. But I think we have to engage. We have to engage with each other, and we have to engage with children so that they're not carrying this heaviness and this mystery and this burden all their life, not knowing what happened, where this parent went or why is there's a mystery, a secret, kind of that sort of thing. And it's really having to do with our uncomfortable. We say, well, we have to accept death. It's part of life. We say that. It's like saying, good morning, how are you, right? We don't really want somebody to answer that question. You're supposed to just say, fine, thank you. Not, well, I'll tell you, things just really are horrible and blah, 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 So, what we really need to have is a conversation about death and dying and challenge that. Do I really accept it? And where do people go when they die? And where am I going to go? And where's my loved one? And are they okay? That's what I was like. I finally, I was asking Spirit all the time, where is he? You better be taking care of him. You better be, he better be okay, because I'm coming. I'll be there one of these days. I'm going to chase you all down, right? Right. So it's those kind of things that we don't want to talk about that are scary, right? And then we get all these concepts, heaven and hell and this and that. And the first thing you know, our minds are just all aflutter.
Mhm.
And often they're aflutter with shame, blame, and guilt. I should have done this. I should have made them go to the doctor. I should have come home sooner. I shouldn't have gone on vacation. I should have had a different babysitter when they were 2. Maybe that's it. I mean, I could go all the way back in all the places where I starred in the role of not being the perfect parent. Right. And so we carry a lot of this heaviness in our head that we don't acknowledge. And sometimes we're angry. What if we're angry at a partner? What if we're angry at a spouse? What if we're angry at our parents or sisters or brothers? Big taboos nobody wants to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we need to talk about this. And a lot of books are going to tell you when someone dies, you need to start living again. You need to go party, or you need to go to a movie, or you need to go on a date, right? You need to do all these things. And that's in this physical, heavy realm of Earth planet. But what if we have some spiritual work we need to do ahead of time? What if we keep saying we're not ready, and we become isolated in our grief and loss because people get tired or uncomfortable, don't want to hear about it anymore, and we don't want to talk about it to people who don't want to hear about it, right? So what if we have to do a little work ahead of time? So my book is 16 exercises where you actually sit really quietly with a pen and paper and a candle and a pie pan and ask yourself questions with the intention then you can write with radical honesty in your notebook. Who's judging you?
Wow.
Who are you judging, right? And even maybe I was judging Ben. I found out at the heart of it, part in what was living in me that I didn't want to acknowledge, I was furious at him for doing this stupid thing. Furious, right? And other people are furious at their loved ones secretly that they didn't go to the doctor or do what they were supposed to do or went on that trip or did that foolish thing, right? So sometimes we need to just get to the root of that. And then we can take, or maybe our mothers or fathers or sisters or brothers weren't there when we needed them, didn't help. We can write this all down and burn it in our candle. So we don't have to worry about anybody ever seeing it. Release it to spirit, for spirit to transform for us. And then at the same time, we're opening our hearts for a different perspective.
Wow.
Right?
beautiful.
So this is like the metaphor for breath, breathing in, breathing out. So we're breathing in fresh air, breathing out the old. Same thing with this. We're breathing out old ways of seeing and perceiving and opening our hearts to new ways. And as we do that, as we sit, and I like to have people sit with a candle and whatever is sacred for them, a sacred spot, whatever. Because when we get into ceremony, when we're actually opening ourselves to the divine, we get out of our reptilian brain of fight, flight, fear, and move up to our neocortex. And in the neocortex, things move like a feather blowing in the wind instead of us trying to shift things in the physical level. So we're going to do all this work, 16 exercises, non-suffering. What are the stories you're telling yourself that are making you suffer? How about attachment? A lot of times we get attached to the role of grieving mother.
Ooh, yeah.
Grieving widow, grieving whatever, right? Heavy, heavy roles. What if we could lighten it up a little bit and release some of the heavy energy around that? So even looking at it and admitting that those roles can be addictive. Right? Grief can even have an addictive nature to grief because, there's a great book by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he talks about breaking the habit of being yourself. And he talks about all the hormones, and so adrenaline, cortisol. So when we're in drama, stress, grief, whatever kind of drama you're in, these addictive hormones kick in, right? And so we become addicted to them. And so it's really hard to get out of that routine without some help. And the help of the divine is always the best help, right? Releasing things to the divine.
Wow.
Yeah. I love that you are addressing the emotional level and also the spiritual level as you opened up to the divine. It sounds to me in a way that your son's death was the gateway for you to opening to the divine. I'm curious, you saw him the first day when he died. And how have you kept that relationship going? I'm really a strong believer that keeping our relationships with those who have crossed over is essential to really embracing life and moving forward.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So for me, I was really lucky because I had that dramatic experience and that dramatic opening. And one thing I can tell you about the other side is, and I always tell people this, sometimes people are afraid to let go of their suffering and their grieving because they can they can feel their loved one around them, and they think if I let go of any of this, they're going to disappear. I always tell people it's not prison over on the other side, right?
And we're not holding them back.
Right.
Go, right? They can come and go. And so you don't lose them. What you lose is keeping them stuck in between realms in a heavier situation because they're so concerned about us. And that was the situation with Ben. In the beginning, he was flittering around me all the time, really for a year and a half. And he really didn't cross over fully until I was okay. And so sometimes we hold on to their kite strings a little bit with our grief and our heaviness. Yes, we love having them around us, and our fear that they're going to disappear and not be with us anymore can sometimes keep us from moving forward with our grief, for transmuting it a little bit. And so once we realize that, and I've had many people talk to me about that concept and said, oh my gosh, I never realized that I was keeping them back from things that they could do on the other side, like work with ascended masters, be in the Jesus pod, be in this pod, learn from each other, whatever, all the beautiful things they do on the other side that we're not entirely party to because we're in this realm. And so I've had people that have carried it for so long, and they were able to say, oh my gosh, that gave them the courage to move a little, to shift a little, and not cling so deeply to their grief and loss.
Wow.
And do you find yourself still connected to him in the near
Yes.
frequency? Yeah.
Yes, he and I have a working relationship. So I do a lot of work helping souls to cross over fully to the other side and work with people who have died, who people have just left their body and beginning their spiritual life. So, and there are many times he helps me with that, especially with suicides. You know, a lot of times they get stuck because we have this long history of saying if you commit suicide, that's a sin and you're going to burn in hell. And so suicides often are terrified. They're there and they know they died and now they're like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. Uh-oh. And so my son and I will work with them to help them. And he'll say, hey, man, come with me. It's not like that. I'll show you the way. I'll show you the ropes. So I have this special working relationship, probably because of my shamanic practices, but many people have connected with their loved ones and they know they're around. And some people tell me, but I don't feel that. I want to feel that too. How do I do that? So what I like to tell people is to find a place in your house, wherever it is, just a small spot where you can sit very quietly and have a moment where you're talking to your loved one.
Yeah.
You may or may not hear a response, but just be in that moment of communicating. And as you open that doorway to communication, excuse me, things will often shift and open for you.
Well, speaking of shifting, I think we're going to take a quick break and let all of us cough, because it's still early in the morning. And when we come back, I want you to tell us about the Four Winds process. I mean, the Four Winds medicine wheel that you learned from Dr. Alberto Villoldo. I think that it's an amazing thing that we discussed in our other interview that I would love for you to share with our audience. So we're going to take a brief break and we'll be back in about 45 seconds this time.
Hi there, Sheila Applegate here with some exciting news. I've joined the incredible Soulivity team as the host of the new Consciously Awesome live show, where I will be sharing insights to help you discover your full brilliance and claim the vibrant life you deserve. So tune in every Wednesday right here on Soulivity TV to join the fun, and remember to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss a single episode. Have an awesome week, and I will see you on Wednesday.
That's right. You can see Sheila Applegate today at 12 noon, where she's going to be talking about our emotions. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait. Can't wait, Sheila. That's going to be
a perfect
really
continuation of our conversation this morning, right?
Exactly. So don't miss that, everybody. Dr. Johnson, we were talking about this transformation that you went undergo after your son transitioned.
Yeah.
And you discovered this process called the Four Winds medicine wheel that is being taught by Dr. Villoldo. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So Alberto Villoldo is the founder of the Four Winds Society. He's written many books on shamanism. I think he's in 20 something. So, I mean, he's a prolific writer and great teacher. And so it's really based on the Andean medicine wheel. There's many medicine wheels in many cultures all over the world, North America, South America. So this is the South American from Peru based medicine wheel that has practices attached to them that are people understand from Buddhism and Christianity and any other religious things like I talked about before: non-judgment, non-suffering, non-attachment. Mm-hmm. So the south direction. So in the southern hemisphere, the the direction of the south direction is where we begin because it's based on the Southern Cross. So it's a little different cosmology than in the north, and that's why it's a little bit different. In the north, they often begin in the east, and they have different archetypal animals. So in the south direction of the medicine wheel, it's associated with the archetype of the serpent. And the serpent, the idea of this archetype is to help us to shed our past, the way the serpent sheds its skin. And then after that, we move to the west direction. The west direction in this medicine wheel is the archetype is jaguar. And the jaguar helps us to become fearless and to call whatever is dead and dying within us the way the jaguar calls whatever is dead and dying in the jungle. So the practices there are, one of the practices is fearlessness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the north direction is the archetype of hummingbird. Hummingbird, stillness in motion. Hummingbird that takes that epic journey from Canada to Brazil and back every year, trusting totally that along the way it's going to find nothing but nectar, that it's going to be fed, that it's going to make it, right? And it's a metaphor for our journey with spirit. If we could be that trusting to go on our epic soul journey, trusting that we would be taken care of along the way. And then the last direction is the east direction. The archetype is the eagle, condor eagle. Eagle who flies wingtip to wingtip with great spirit. Eagle who helps us to see the bigger picture, to always see the great perspective and yet be able to see the smallest mouse in the forest.
Wow.
Helps us, eagle who helps us to find our way over mountains that look like obstacles now and help us to find our destiny, our real destiny in life. Not the one that we've been told is our destiny, not the one that we think society would want us to have, but our true destiny.
Wow.
So those are the archetypal energies. And so you can imagine when you're in this medicine wheel and you're doing the work here, it's very transformative.
One final question for you for this segment, and that is, what experience do you want people to walk away from after reading your book?
I like people to know that transformation is not only possible, but that we actually have within us an innate desire to transform. And as we stay stuck in our grief and loss, we are going against our natures and against maybe the natures of the cosmos, the natures of God. So we really have a desire for transformation, and it's okay. It's okay to transform. It's okay to get beyond our grief and loss and suffering and let go of the kite strings of our loved ones and create new lives in their honor.
Wow. I love that.
And I have one little, people say, well, how the heck am I going to change? Because, we get stuck in our grief and suffering.
Yeah.
And, we're tapping our lines in our head of what we think deeper and deeper and deeper. So we want to create new neural networks.
Yeah.
And one of the ways I tell people to do this is put a sticker on your refrigerator that says practice beauty. And every day do one thing for yourself, one thing that brings beauty to your life, whether it's a chocolate or a sunset or a sunrise or a flower or a moment with your favorite hobby, whatever it is, one thing every day. As we get in the habit of practicing beauty, we're digging those neural networks. Instead of digging the old ones deeper and deeper, we're bringing new ones to bear. that allow us to see things in a little bit different way.
Yes. Yes. I equate that by us creating a new normal, right?
Yes.
The old normal is still there, but we're giving ourselves a chance to make a decision that is more positive for ourselves.
Yeah.
So
And knowing
yeah.
that our loved ones are supporting us. They're
Yes.
right behind us going, yeah, cheering us on. They're not
We have
saying,
this huge support system, right? That's just
right?
there at our fingertips, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
wow. Well, listen, Karen, the book is Living Grieving, Using Energy Medicine to Alchemize Grief and Loss. As always, it is a pleasure. I'm so glad you're here. You're going to be sticking around for our little hot topic session.
Yeah, I want to hear all about it.
And we're going to have some fun. But everybody, please, you can go out and buy the book. We have the link in the chat on both Facebook and YouTube. It's also going to be available at our Go Shop. But please go out and buy this book. I mean, you don't have to have recently lost someone to read this. I think that it is just a great read to start changing in terms of creating that new normal around how you feel about grief itself and even death and transition and the afterlife. So Karen, thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So we'll be right back with more from Karen and our hot topics. So we'll be right back, everybody.
6 years ago, when I started Soulivity, my vision was to support everyone in improving their life through the discovery of their passion and purpose, so they could become the best version of themselves, to battle fear and ignorance, and create a better world today. Get inspired to live your passion and purpose. Visit Soulivity.com now.
And we're back with more this morning with Soulivity. This is Brian Westley Johnson. I'm joined by my beautiful co-host, Sheila Applegate. And our special guest is still with us, Dr. Karen Johnson. We're going to be talking about a little bit of hot topics. And I think, Sheila, you've got a great complimentary topic for
I
us.
do. We're just going to continue right on here today. So, we're all in this state of post-COVID, but not, because COVID is still here. It's never going to end, in the sense that we know it's going to be a part of our society moving forward. And yesterday I read an article in NPR, and it talks about this author, another author, Pauline Boss, who's a retired family therapist and professor of family social science at University of Minnesota. She has just published a book called The Myth of Closure: Ambiguous Loss in a Time of Pandemic and Change. So I thought that I really loved the term ambiguous loss. And I think that it's a great topic for us to just kind of bounce in and apply everything we've talked about to this state that we're in. And it's interesting because she's talking about the loss that we experienced through COVID. As we get back into the world, nothing is the same. She also references this as it's a loss that it's not as clear as death, in that there's the loss that someone died, but ambiguous loss also affects people who are going through the loss of someone through Alzheimer's or dementia, which I can relate to with both of my parents, losing them while they're still here, and that grief process. She also talks about the loss of that comes with the Native American and the schools as the generation was wiped away, and even the police violence, going back to the loss for Black Americans of slavery, but even this police violence that is just not getting enough attention. So there's a whole understanding of what ambiguous loss is. And let's just jump off and tell me what you're thinking about it as I bring this up.
Well, I'm going to be a gentleman and let Karen go first. Karen, what do you think about that?
Oh, gosh. I agree with all of that. It's a loss of any kind. Wow.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I was thinking, it's interesting, Sheila, that you picked this because, in a way, I equate this to how my father transitioned.
Mhm.
It was still during COVID, the height of
Right.
COVID. Um, uh, the number of people that could visit my father in the hospital was still very limited. There was even times at which, during the time that he was in uh, long-term care, that my mother couldn't even go visit him because
Mhm.
of the COVID measures. And so part of our family wanted to think that, oh, well, this was like before, he's got this little thing, it's a little hiccup, he'll come back and then he'll leave the hospital.
Right.
And Dad had other plans.
Yep.
He was preparing us for his transition, and that's why he was in the hospital as long as he was. That's
Yeah.
my own thought process. So um I think that sometimes those things happen. They always happen for a reason, but it's hard for us to see the reason when we're into, I think, Dr. Karen, you were talking about this before, where we're in our heads, we're in what we're socialized to believe about death, or transitioning. We're definitely taught not to even think about it before the person is actually gone, right?
Right.
Which I think is like absolutely cruel to ourselves. It's
Yeah.
not loving to ourselves at all, because death is a natural part of the human experience, right? We were born and then we die. This body, things happen, and either it happens through quote unquote natural causes, or an ambiguous loss happens. So yeah.
Yeah. I think many of us were deprived during COVID of deathbed scenes, deathbed
Oh wow.
areas,
Oof.
right?
Yes.
You didn't get a chance to say, I love yous, I forgive yous,
Hmm.
all those kinds of things. And a lot of people are just really reeling from that and don't really know because there really wasn't a choice. It was like, this
Right.
is the way it is.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you don't miss it and you don't wish you had those final conversations that um, maybe would help to heal a family,
Right.
help to heal what's going on with all the different sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles, and to heal that moment. We missed it. People missed it, and they're still grieving that too, that loss.
Right.
Yeah. My mom died of COVID in early pandemic. So we weren't with her in the physical. And she had been in long-term care. So we had stopped seeing her unexpectedly months before. And at the same time, we were fortunate enough that we were able to get messages through to her and say goodbye over technology, and then also in meditation and spirit. And I think that's why it's so important to address our relationship with death and communication with spirituality prior to the loss, because it helps us through that path too.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah, I know that um I could feel that Dad and his ancestors, my grandparents, were already reaching out to me when he went into the hospital this last time.
Hmm.
And they were already supporting me with the thought, just the thought of what would life be without him physically here,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that it was okay for me to feel whatever emotions that I had around that. Um, it's a little different than when they're actually transitioned, but it did help prepare me for that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, Especially being in a support role for my mother at that point.
Right.
So It's a
And a
great
lot of
topic.
families
Yeah.
don't have that discussion, or they avoid it. I don't want to talk about that. Let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
would you want to talk about that? That's dark. That's, I don't want to talk about my funeral. Why would I talk about it? I don't want to die. It's right. So then we're kind of left at the last moment with trauma, maybe unnecessary trauma that didn't need to be there if we could just take a breath and say, okay, these things will eventually happen to all of us. And so how can we today just talk about this a little bit so that it's not so traumatic at the end for everybody?
Yeah.
Wow. This is a great topic.
Mm-hmm.
Sheila,
Yeah.
did you have thoughts about how people move through ambiguous loss? I mean, it's a little different than, a person, like in the end, we knew my dad had decided
Right.
that he was going to, you know.
Yeah. I think that Alzheimer's and dementia was the area that I could most relate to it, because my dad, like I've said, died of Alzheimer's. My mom had frontal lobe dementia, two
Mm-hmm.
very different processes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a period of a lot of little deaths. And
Yes.
so you feel like you're prepared. And I think people were very supportive of us to the best of their ability. But if you're not experiencing it, it's hard to relate, because you're grieving each phase and
Right.
adjusting. And so by the end, we really, I was expecting my mom to die. I wasn't expecting her to get I didn't know about a
Right.
pandemic coming up, but I
Right.
had had that final a good conversation with her in our last time. But then when the final death happens, there's still so much grief. and
Right.
and it didn't happen until after my mom, I think, because we were still in it with my dad, we were still in it with my mom, and so it just all came out at the end. And so just to let people know it's a process. And I still also believe no matter, my life is about communicating with dead people, but that doesn't make it any easier when people we
Right.
love die.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I call that anticipatory grief.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
yeah, and that's a type of grief too, that people that are caretakers, or even if you're not direct caretaker, your loved ones in this transitional phase, and it's a grieving process right there too.
Right.
And to get in touch with what is really hard about it. Some people really, really, it's super hard, right? Where is it? Where's the judgment? I should have done this. I'm sorry I didn't do this while they were, before this happened, right? So there's a lot that goes on that's grieving, that we don't even think that we're grieving, but we are grieving.
Right.
This was wonderful. This was a wonderful show today.
Yeah.
You
I
always
mean-
have good ones.
Well, listen, Dr. Karen, thank you for being here again. Please go out and get her latest book, Living Grieving. Again, it is just a wonderful, supportive read for all of us to move through grief and loss in a positive, progressive, and practical way, with deep spirituality and deep heart and soul. So thank you for writing this, Dr. Karen.
Hey,
Yeah,
thank you. And thank you for having me. Hey, nice to talk to you again, Sheila, too. All right.
Absolutely. And want to remind everybody that another Consciously Awesome Living is coming up at 12 noon today, where Sheila, you're going to be talking about our emotions.
Embracing the full spectrum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What a wonderful way to segue out of this and, get some tips on your emotions and feeling the full spectrum of them. Also want to remind everybody, listen, follow us on social media. You want to do that. Why? Because you can find out about upcoming shows and giveaways and all kinds of happy, wonderful things that can make your life better. You can also join our mailing list by going to our This Morning website at soulivity.com/this-morning. And I think that's it, y'all. Listen, on behalf of all of us here, I want to say thanks for joining us for another great episode of This Morning with Soulivity. We hope that you come back and join us every single weekday at 8 a.m. Eastern, or you can listen to our rebroadcast at 11 a.m. Eastern for all of you out on the West Coast. Until next time, for all of us again, keep having real conversations with passion and purpose, and create a life full of high quality living today. We'll see you later.
Bye. Thank you.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted its prior written consent. All other rights reserved.